My brother shoved my 10-year-old daughter's face into her birthday cake, leaving her bleeding and crying, and my parents told me to apologize to him. So, I packed our things, walked out of their lives, and spent the next 5 years quietly building a multi-million-dollar empire until the day I bought my father's bankrupt company and fired my entire family on the spot. My name is Liam. I'm 35 years old, and before I tell you about the absolute financial and emotional devastation none of them saw coming, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, let's go back to the day my life shattered and rebuilt itself. It was Lily's 10th birthday. For a single dad, hitting double digits is a monumental milestone. Since my wife passed away 3 years prior, Lily had become my entire universe. She was the only reason I dragged my exhausted body out of bed at 4:30 a.m. every single morning. She was the reason I worked 60-hour weeks at a freezing Chicago construction site, hauling drywall and pouring concrete just to keep the heat on in our cramped, damp apartment. Lily had a soul made of pure magic, just like her mother. She was obsessed with fantasy books, knights, and castle stories where the villains always face justice. So, for her big day, I wanted to give her a piece of that magic. I couldn't afford a $500 custom cake from a boutique bakery, but I had steady hands and an architecture degree that my parents had forced me to abandon. I stayed up for 3 consecutive nights. I baked a rich vanilla bean sponge from scratch and whipped up a fresh raspberry buttercream. But the structure was where I poured my soul. I hand-sculpted tiny cobblestones out of fondant. I spun boiling sugar into fragile, glass-like stained windows. I built a literal 3-story castle out of tempered white chocolate. When I finished, it wasn't just a cake, it was a promise. It was me telling her that even though her mom was gone, I would build a beautiful world for her with my bare hands. The party was hosted at my parents' house. My mother, Martha, had reluctantly allowed us to use her pristine suburban backyard. She always complained that my apartment smelled like failure and wanted to control the aesthetics of the photos. Lily wore a pale purple dress, looking like a little princess. She kept circling the cake table, her eyes wide with absolute awe. "Daddy, it's too beautiful, I don't want to cut it," she whispered. I smoothed her hair. "Castles are made to be conquered, sweetie, but we have to wait for Uncle Marcus and Grandpa." That was the catalyst for the nightmare. Marcus, my older brother, was the undisputed golden child of the family. He arrived 2.5 hours late. He was 39, drove a leased Porsche that my dad secretly paid for, and wore tailored Italian suits he absolutely did not earn. Marcus had always been the main character in my parents' eyes, while I was merely a background extra. He had bankrupted 3 different tech startups, yet my parents treated him like a visionary genius, draining their retirement accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle. When Marcus finally swaggered into the backyard, the overwhelming scent of Tom Ford cologne couldn't mask the sharp stench of stale vodka. He was stumbling, a fresh glass of scotch already sloshing in his hand. He laughed, a loud, obnoxious sound that shattered the quiet afternoon. "Busy people don't wear watches, right? Happy birthday, kid." He didn't even look at Lily. My dad, Arthur, sat at the head of the patio table, waving his hand dismissively. "It's fine, son. You're here now. Sit down, you worked too hard." I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles turning stark white. Work? Marcus hadn't worked a legitimate day in his entire life. But I swallowed my anger for Lily's sake. "Okay," I forced a tight smile. "Time for candles. Make a wish, Lily." Lily closed her eyes tightly, her small hands clasped over her heart. The candlelight flickered across her innocent face. I knew she was wishing her mom was there. Just as she took a deep breath to blow out the candles, Marcus abruptly stood up. He swayed dangerously, looming over the delicate chocolate castle. "What the hell is this garbage?" Marcus slurred, pointing a shaking finger at the cake. "You make this, Liam? God, it looks so pathetic. Real men build actual buildings. They don't play with sugar and candy." "Marcus, back off," I warned, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. "Let her blow out her candles." "Oh, lighten up, you loser. I'm just joking." Marcus sneered. He looked at Lily, then back at the cake. A cruel, intrusive thought visibly crossed his intoxicated mind, his eyes glazing over with pure malice. Before my brain could even process his movement, Marcus lunged. "Have a bite, princess." He grabbed the back of Lily's neck and violently shoved her face downward. Crunch. That sound will echo in my nightmares until the day I die. It wasn't a soft landing. The structural white chocolate shattered. The hard sugar glass windows snapped into jagged shards. Lily's face hit the dense sponge cake with a sickening thud. She screamed. It wasn't a child's surprised yelp, it was a shriek of absolute terror and physical agony. Lily flailed backward, ripping her face out of the cake. Her beautiful face was smeared with smashed raspberry cream and crumbs, but underneath the red frosting, there was real, bright red blood. A jagged shard of the hard sugar glass had sliced a deep gash across her cheek, and the acidic raspberry jam was burning her eyes. She was coughing, choking on the dense cake, screaming, "Daddy, My eyes, it burns. Marcus threw his head back and laughed a loud, braying, soulless laugh. Look at her, she looks like a horror movie extra. Happy birthday. A red mist descended over my vision. In that fraction of a second, I wasn't the submissive, quiet younger brother anymore. I was a father protecting his cub. I vaulted over the corner of the table and shoved Marcus squarely in the chest with both hands. Are you out of your psychotic mind? Marcus, drunk and top-heavy, tripped backward over a lawn chair and crashed hard into the grass. His scotch glass shattered on the patio. Instantly, my mother shrieked like a banshee. Marcus, oh my God, are you okay? She literally ran past her bleeding, sobbing granddaughter to help a 39-year-old man up from the dirt, frantically brushing grass off his designer jacket. Nobody, not my mother, not my aunts, looked at Lily. I dropped to my knees, frantically using my shirt to wipe the frosting and blood away from Lily's eyes, my heart shattering as she sobbed hysterically into my shoulder. Dad! I yelled, turning to Arthur. I needed him to be a grandfather. I needed him to execute justice. Arthur stood up slowly. He looked at Marcus, who was faking a limp. He looked at the ruined castle, the symbol of my love entirely demolished. And then he looked at me. His eyes were dead, devoid of any paternal warmth. He took off his heavy gold signet ring and slammed it down onto the glass patio table. Bang! The entire backyard went deathly silent. The only sound was Lily's whimpering. My father pointed a trembling, furious finger at me. You dare? He roared, his face turning purple. You dare put your hands on your brother over a stupid piece of cake? I froze, my brain failing to compute the sheer absurdity of his words. Dad, he shoved her face into glass. She is bleeding. It was a joke. Arthur bellowed. It was a man's joke. You have always been this way, Liam, too soft, too sensitive. Marcus is the eldest. He was toughening her up, and you respond with unprovoked violence against your own flesh and blood. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with venom. Exactly, Liam. Look at Marcus's suit, it's grass-stained and ruined. That cake was nothing but a cheap distraction. Stop making a scene and ruining the party. I looked at them, I truly looked at the people who had raised me, and I realized I was staring at strangers. They didn't care about Lily. They never had. You call that a joke? I asked, my voice vibrating with 3 decades of suppressed rage. She is 10 years old. She is terrified, and you're worried about a dry cleaning bill? If you don't know how to behave in this family, Arthur stated, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold whisper, then get off my property. I don't have a son who is jealous and disrespectful. Walk out that gate and don't come back until you are ready to get on your knees and apologize to your brother. I looked down at Lily. She was gripping my ruined shirt so tightly her knuckles were white. One eye was completely swollen shut. Let's go, Daddy, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, take me home. I scooped Lily up into my arms. I didn't say another word. I didn't look at my parents. I didn't look at the smug, victorious smirk creeping onto Marcus's face. I walked straight out the side gate and into the gray, drizzling afternoon. I lost my biological family that day, but I promise you, that was not the end of the story. That was merely the prologue to my revenge. Update 1. The drive back to our neighborhood was a blur of rain and quiet tears. My old rusted truck rattled as we hit potholes, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. Lily sat curled into a tight ball in the passenger seat. I had used a water bottle to clean the rest of the sticky cream off her face, but the sickly sweet smell of raspberry, a smell that should have meant joy now, filled the cab with the stench of humiliation. Daddy? Lily's voice was barely audible over the engine. Is it my fault? Did I do something bad? Is that why Uncle Marcus hurt me? That question felt like a physical knife twisting in my gut. It knocked the air straight out of my lungs. No, Lily. I said, gripping the steering wheel until my hands ached. You did absolutely nothing wrong. Uncle Marcus is a bully. And Grandpa and Grandma were wrong to protect him. But Grandpa told you to leave. She sniffled. He never yells at Uncle Marcus. Not even when Marcus crashed his car last year. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. Kids notice everything. The glaring unfairness wasn't new, it was the rotting foundation our entire family was built upon. As I drove, my mind was violently dragged back to the past. I remembered being 18. I had graduated high school with honors and got accepted into a prestigious university for architecture. I wanted to build skyscrapers. But the week before my tuition was due, my parents sat me down. Arthur wouldn't look me in the eye. The college money isn't there, Liam. What? I had asked, panicked. Marcus needed capital for his new app development company, Arthur had declared, daring me to argue. He's an entrepreneur. He's going to make this family millions. We transferred your college fund to his business account. You're good with your hands, Liam. Go work construction. It's cheaper. They stole my future to fund Marcus's first failed business, an app that went bankrupt in 7 months because he spent the budget on VIP club tables in Vegas. They clipped my wings so Marcus could pretend he knew how to fly. And now, They were trying to teach my daughter that her physical safety didn't matter as much as Marcus's ego. Never again. I pulled the truck over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking, but my mind had never been clearer. I pulled out my phone. I had 18 missed calls from Martha and 5 texts from Marcus. I opened Marcus's thread. "You're such a coward. Dad is furious. You better turn that truck around and grovel right now, or you can kiss your inheritance goodbye. Don't be an idiot." Inheritance, money. That was the leash they always used to yank me back into submission. They thought financial threats would make me swallow my pride. I typed one single response: "Keep your money. I have everything of value sitting in the passenger seat. We are permanently done." I hit send. I blocked Marcus. I blocked Arthur. I blocked Martha. I blocked every aunt, uncle, and cousin who had stood in that backyard and watched my daughter bleed in silence. I tossed the phone onto the dashboard. I was poor, I was entirely alone, and I had no safety net. But as I merged back onto the highway, the crushing weight of their expectations and gaslighting lifted. I was finally free, and I was going to build a fortress so strong they could never touch us again. The next 2 years were a masterclass in sheer survival. We lived in a basement apartment that constantly smelled of mildew. The heater sounded like a dying lawnmower. To rebuild a savings account for Lily's future, I pushed my body beyond human limits. I woke up at 4 a.m. to haul concrete and hang drywall at the construction site until 4 p.m. I'd rush home, feed Lily, help her with her math homework, and kiss her goodnight. Then, a trusted neighbor would listen out for her while I went to my second job. I got hired as a nighttime dishwasher at Sophia's, the most elite, high-end bakery in downtown Chicago. I was an invisible ghost. I stood at the back sink for 5 hours a night, scrubbing burnt caramel off heavy copper pans until my knuckles bled. But my eyes were always watching. I watched the master pastry chefs temper chocolate. I watched them mix fondant. And most importantly, I watched them completely fail at structural engineering. The head chef, a guy named Julian, was a flavor genius but an architectural disaster. He tried to build massive, towering wedding cakes, but he didn't understand physics. He didn't understand load-bearing pillars, torque, or center of gravity. I'd watch him stack tiers that were clearly leaning, using wooden dowels that were far too thin to support the mass. "Gravity doesn't work like that," I'd mutter to myself over the sink. But nobody listens to the dishwasher. Until one freezing Friday night. It was the bakery's biggest contract of the decade. A state senator was hosting a massive charity gala, and he had ordered a 6-foot-tall replica of the Brooklyn Bridge made entirely of dark chocolate, sponge cake, and spun sugar. It was a $25,000 order. Disaster struck at 8 p.m. Julian slipped on a puddle of spilled oil, shattered his ankle, and was rushed away in an ambulance. Absolute chaos erupted. The junior chefs panicked. They tried to assemble the bridge based on Julian's messy sketches, but the structure kept sagging. The chocolate suspension cables were snapping under the immense weight of the cake tiers. Sophia, the owner, a fierce, intimidating woman who tolerated zero mistakes, was pacing the kitchen, hyperventilating. "We are ruined," she muttered, grabbing her hair. "The delivery truck arrives in 3 hours. We cannot send a collapsed pile of garbage to a senator." The kitchen fell dead silent, thick with the smell of melting chocolate and despair. I wiped my blistered hands on my dirty apron, stepped away from the sink, and walked toward the prep table. "Miss Sophia," I said, my voice raspy from disuse. Everyone stared at me. A junior chef scoffed. "Get back to the dishes, Liam. We don't have time for this." "I can fix it," I said, ignoring him, looking dead into Sophia's eyes. Sophia looked at my scuffed steel-toe boots and calloused hands. "You are the dishwasher, Liam. I used to study architecture," I said firmly, "and I build houses for a living. Your problem isn't the chocolate, it's the physics. The internal supports are placed wrong. The torque is snapping the beams because the weight distribution is asymmetrical. Give me 2 hours. I can re-engineer the internal frame using hard candy supports and redistribute the mass." Maybe it was sheer desperation, or maybe she saw the absolute certainty in my eyes, but Sophia slowly nodded. "If you ruin it further, you are fired. Do it." I stepped up to the table. Suddenly, the bakery faded away. It became a job site. The chocolate was concrete. The sugar was steel. I worked in a state of absolute flow. I melted down hard candies to cast rigid I-beams. I used tempered dark chocolate as welding material. I calculated the precise angles of suspension. I shaved exact millimeters off the cake layers to perfectly center the mass. My hands, rough from bricks and mortar, moved with surgical precision. 2 hours and 40 minutes later, the Brooklyn Bridge stood on the steel table. It was 6 feet long, perfectly straight, and structurally flawless. I brushed the cables with edible silver dust so they caught the light. The kitchen was completely silent. Sophia walked up to the bridge. She tentatively tapped one of the main chocolate towers. It didn't even vibrate. It was as solid as a rock. She turned to me, her eyes welling up with tears. "Liam," she whispered. "How?" "Just balancing the load, ma'am," I shrugged, turning back toward my sink. "Stop, Sophia commanded. She grabbed my arm. You are never touching a dirty dish in my kitchen ever again. You have the hands of a master builder. From tomorrow on, you are my lead structural designer. That night changed the trajectory of my entire life. My income quadrupled. But I didn't stop there. Over the next 5 years, I evolved. I realized there was a massive, untapped market for structurally impossible edible centerpieces and event architecture. I partnered with Sophia, bought out her retiring partner, and rebranded the company as Vanguard Event Structures. We didn't just make cakes anymore. We built massive, interactive, gravity-defying installations for tech billionaires, corporate galas, and elite weddings. We operated out of a massive converted warehouse in the Arts District. We didn't advertise, we were an exclusive, invite-only service. I went from hauling drywall to commanding $50,000 to $100,000 per contract. I was wealthy, I was respected, and my family had absolutely no idea I even existed in this tax bracket. To them, I was still the broke loser, who stormed out, over a cake. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in November, the ghosts of my past finally caught up to me. I was in my private office, reviewing blueprints for a suspended floral installation for a celebrity wedding, when my assistant, Leo, knocked on the glass door. He looked incredibly uncomfortable. "Boss," Leo said, clearing his throat. "There is a woman in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's crying. She says her name is Chloe. She says she's your sister-in-law." My pen stopped moving. I hadn't heard that name in 5 years. Chloe was Marcus's wife. "Send her in," I said slowly. Chloe walked into my office clutching a wet designer handbag like a shield. She looked absolutely haunted. The Chloe I remembered was a pristine, arrogant country club wife who used to look down her nose at my cheap clothes. This woman had dark circles under her eyes, her hair was a mess, and she looked utterly broken. When she saw me, she stopped dead in her tracks. I wasn't wearing a dirty t-shirt. I was wearing a tailored charcoal suit, sitting behind a massive reclaimed wood desk. "Liam?" she breathed, her eyes darting around the luxurious office. My God, the rumors in the industry were true. You really are the CEO of Vanguard. "Hello, Chloe," I said coldly, not offering her a seat. "Why are you here?" "I'm leaving him," she blurted out, a sob escaping her throat. "I filed for divorce 3 days ago. I took my 2 boys and moved into a hotel." I felt a tiny flicker of human sympathy, but I extinguished it immediately. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I fail to see what Marcus's marriage has to do with me. He's going to destroy me, Liam," she panicked, stepping forward. "He's fighting for full custody of the boys. Not because he loves them, he doesn't even know what grade they are in. He wants them so he can control my family trust fund. He hired absolute sharks for lawyers, and he's claiming I'm mentally unstable." "And you want money for legal fees?" I asked, reaching toward my desk drawer. "Fine. For the sake of my nephews, I'll write you a check." "No." Chloe reached into her massive tote bag and pulled out a ridiculously thick, heavy black binder. She slammed it onto my desk. "I don't want your money, I want you to completely ruin him." I looked at the binder. The label read, RD Builders, Internal Financial Ledgers 2020 to 2025. RD Builders was my father's construction company, the legacy he prized above all else. "What is this?" I asked. "It's the murder weapon," Chloe whispered bitterly. "You know your dad's company is failing, right? The whole industry knows. They are hemorrhaging cash and are weeks away from declaring total bankruptcy." I nodded. I knew. I had watched their stock and public valuation plummet for the last 8 months. It was my favorite morning coffee reading material. "Marcus blames the economy. He blames the unions and material costs," Chloe said, her voice hardening into pure hatred. "But, it's him, Liam. It's always been him." I opened the binder. It was a forensic accounting nightmare. My eyes rapidly scanned the columns. It was a complete slaughter. There were massive withdrawals for consulting fees wired to shell companies in the Caymans. There were company credit card charges for private jets to Vegas, high-stakes sports betting, and luxury car leases. All flagged as business expenses. "He's been embezzling," I said, the realization hitting me like a freight train. "He's been stealing directly from Dad for years. I need Marcus stopped right now," Chloe said, leaning over my desk. "And because I know what they are doing tomorrow morning." I raised an eyebrow. "Enlighten me." "They are desperate. They are meeting with a private equity firm called Apex Holdings tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. They are trying to sell a 51% controlling interest in the company for a massive cash injection to cover up the payroll fraud before the state auditors arrive next week." I sat back in my chair. Apex Holdings. Chloe looked around my office, at the architectural awards on the wall, and at the framed photo of Lily on my desk. "Vanguard. Apex. It's you, isn't it? You own the equity firm." I looked at her. I didn't smile. I picked up my desk phone and dialed Leo's extension. "Leo," I said, my voice eerily calm, "call our legal acquisition team. Tell them to prep the final buyout papers for RD Builders. And tell them I will be leading the negotiation personally tomorrow morning. I hung up and looked at Chloe. You'll get full custody of your boys, I promised her, and tomorrow, Marcus won't just lose his marriage. He's going to lose his entire kingdom. Update 2. I didn't sleep a single minute that night. I sat in my home office in my penthouse, staring at the financial ledgers. I thought about the smashed cake. I thought about Arthur slamming his ring on the table. I thought about Lily asking if she was a bad girl. I wasn't just going to buy a company tomorrow. I was going to perform a corporate execution. The morning of the meeting, Chicago was battered by a torrential downpour. The sky was a bruised, heavy gray. It felt incredibly fitting. For 5 years, I had dressed for utility. Today, I dressed for war. I put on a bespoke midnight blue 3-piece suit. I fastened a platinum Patek Philippe watch to my wrist, a watch that cost more than the house I grew up in. I styled my hair back, revealing the gray that had started to touch my temples. I didn't look like the soft, quiet scapegoat anymore. I looked like an apex predator. Before I left, Lily walked into the kitchen. She was 16 now, tall, confident, and brilliant. She was holding a mug of tea, wearing her private school uniform. You look terrifying, she said, raising an eyebrow. Is today the day? I grabbed my briefcase. Yes, sweetie, today is the day. Are you going to destroy them? She asked quietly. No, I said gently, kissing her forehead. I'm just going to hold up a mirror. Whatever destroys them is already inside them. I drove my sleek black Audi to the RD Builders headquarters. The building was a depressing shadow of its former glory. The landscaping was overgrown, and the letters on the concrete sign were visibly rusting. I walked into the lobby. The receptionist, a temp who had no idea who I was, didn't even look up from her phone. Meeting with Apex Holdings, I said smoothly. Top floor boardroom. She lazily pointed to the elevator. The ride to the top floor felt like a lifetime. Every floor ping was a countdown to absolute reckoning. The door slid open. I walked down the dimly lit hallway. I could hear voices echoing from inside the boardroom. Stop pacing, Marcus, they'll be here. My father's voice sounded weak, ragged. The email said 9 a.m. sharp. I hate dealing with these faceless shadow investors, Marcus whined, his voice grating on my nerves. Who is this Apex guy anyway? Who cares? My mother, Martha, snapped. As long as his check clears, Marcus. Fix your tie. You look incredibly unprofessional. I adjusted my cuffs. I took a deep breath, savoring the final moment of their ignorance, and pushed the heavy oak double doors open. The doors swung inward with a loud groan. 3 heads violently snapped toward me. The boardroom was massive but dusty, lit only by the gloomy rain hitting the floor-to-ceiling windows. At the far end of the long mahogany table sat the architects of my trauma, Arthur, Martha, and Marcus. For a solid 10 seconds, absolute silence reigned. They squinted at me. The silhouette of a broad-shouldered man in a $4,000 suit standing in the doorway simply did not compute with their deeply ingrained memory of Liam, the failure. Marcus broke the silence. He genuinely didn't recognize me at first. He threw his hands up in exasperation. Finally, you must be the junior rep from Apex Holdings. You're late. We have a very tight schedule. I didn't say a single word. I walked into the room, the heels of my leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the hardwood. Click, click, click. I walked past the empty chairs. I walked past Marcus, catching the distinct, pathetic smell of breath mints trying to hide morning vodka. I walked past my mother, who was staring at my watch with a deeply confused frown. I walked straight to the head of the table, directly opposite my father. I pulled out the heavy leather chair, sat down, and placed Chloe's massive black binder onto the table. Only then did I look up. Arthur was staring at me. His mouth was hanging slightly open. His eyes were darting frantically over my face, his brain aggressively trying to reject reality. Liam? He whispered. It came out as a terrified squeak. Marcus spun around in his chair. What, Liam? He squinted, leaning forward, and then let out a harsh, barking laugh. Holy shit, it is Liam. The brief shock on Marcus's face instantly morphed back into his default setting, sneering contempt. It was muscle memory for him. He clapped slowly, sarcastically. Wow. Look at you, playing dress up. Did you get a job as a chauffeur for the Apex investors? Is that it? You're here to set up the coffee before the real men show up? Liam, my mother scolded, her voice finding its old, shrill, commanding rhythm. You absolutely cannot be in here. We are in the middle of a corporate crisis. We are waiting for the owners of Apex Holdings. If they see you here in this costume, they'll think we're a joke. Have you no shame? Get out. I leaned back in the plush chair, resting my elbows on the armrests, and steepled my fingers. I'm not the chauffeur, I said. My voice was deep, calm, and resonated through the room without me needing to raise it. And I'm not late. It is exactly 9 a.m. Marcus slammed his hand on the table. I am not in the mood for your pathetic reunion tour. Security. There is no security, I stated simply. You fired the entire security staff last week to save money. Remember? No. Marcus froze, his hand hovering in the air. And you can stop waiting for the CEO of Apex Holdings. I continued, locking eyes with my father, watching the color rapidly drain from his face. You're looking at him. What? Arthur croaked, grabbing his chest. Apex, I enunciated clearly. Did you really think it was a coincidence that the only firm willing to touch this sinking ship reached out this week? That's legally impossible, Martha stammered, frantically clutching her pearls. You wash dishes. You live in a basement. You don't have money. I have enough liquid capital to buy this building, burn it to the ground, and build a skyscraper over the ashes just for fun, I said, my voice dropping to a freezing temperature. While your golden boy was busy bankrupting your legacy, I was busy building an empire. My salary isn't paid by daddy anymore, Marcus. I sign my own checks. Marcus's face turned a violent, mottled shade of crimson. You're lying. You're bluffing. You rented that suit. You're just here to gloat because you heard we were having a rough quarter. A rough quarter? I raised an eyebrow, amused by his delusion. Is that what you're calling a $4.2 million deficit? I reached for the black binder. I am here to make a formal offer. I said professionally, I will buy 100% of the assets of RD Builders. I will inject the necessary capital to save the company from immediate insolvency. I will ensure the 150 blue-collar employees, people who actually work for a living, do not lose their jobs or their pensions. You would do that? Arthur's eyes welled up with desperate tears. He saw a lifeline. Oh, Liam. Son, I knew it. I knew deep down you cared about the family legacy. I knew you would come back to us. I cut him off, my voice sharpening into a blade. There are conditions. Anything, Arthur said, practically weeping. Name it. Condition number 1, I said. I want to talk about the cake. The cake? Marcus looked genuinely baffled. What cake? Lily's 10th birthday cake, I said. The one you destroyed. The one you laughed at while she bled. Oh, for the love of God. Marcus threw his hands up, rolling his eyes dramatically. Are you seriously still harping on that? That was 5 years ago. It was a harmless joke. Get over it, you sensitive little... I stood up. I picked up the extraordinarily heavy binder of evidence. I walked slowly down the length of the table until I was looming directly over Arthur. You slammed your ring on the table, I whispered to my father, staring into his soul. Do you remember? You slammed your gold ring down, told me I was pathetic, and banished me. Liam, please, Arthur whimpered, shrinking back into his chair. I lifted the heavy binder high above my head. This is my ring, I hissed. Bam! I slammed the binder down onto the mahogany table with every ounce of physical strength I possessed. The sound was like a cannon going off in the closed room. A visible crack splintered down the center of the wood. Martha screamed. Marcus physically jumped out of his chair, stumbling backward. Read it, I commanded, my voice booming with absolute authority. Arthur, shaking uncontrollably, opened the binder. What is this? He gasped, his eyes darting over the highlighted numbers. That, I said, pointing a lethal finger at Marcus, is the undeniable proof that your golden child is a parasite and a thief? Look at page 12, Dad. Look at the offshore transfers. Arthur's eyes scanned the page, his breathing becoming shallow. $400,000 to a Cayman account, $80,000 for a luxury boat lease? He stole every single cent, I said mercilessly, letting the reality crush them. The college funds for his own children? Gone. Your retirement accounts? Gone. The equity in the house you live in? Embezzled. He didn't just fail at business, Dad. He robbed you completely blind to pay for his gambling addictions. Arthur slowly looked up at Marcus. The sheer devastation and betrayal in the old man's eyes was absolute. Marcus. Tell me this is a lie. Tell me this is a mistake. Marcus was backing away toward the door, his face as pale as a ghost. Dad, listen, it's complicated. The market was brutal. I just borrowed it. Dad. I was going to win it back and replace it, I swear. You stole my life, Arthur screamed. He tried to stand up, grabbing his chest, his face contorting in agony. I trusted you, I gave you everything. I sacrificed Liam for you. Sit down, I barked. They both froze. The sheer dominance in my voice anchored them to the spot. They sat. Here is the final offer, I said, buttoning my suit jacket smoothly. I buy the company for $1. I assume all debts, which keeps you out of federal prison for fraud. But the board of directors is dissolved immediately. You, Dad. You, Mom. And you, Marcus. You are all fired. Today. Right this second. The silence that followed was suffocating. It was the sound of an entire dynasty crumbling into dust. Marcus was the first to completely break. The arrogance, the sneer, the golden child persona, it all evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, terrified shell of a man. He didn't just stand up, he fell to his knees. He actually crawled across the carpeted floor toward me. Liam, Liam, please. He blubbered, tears streaming down his face, reaching out to grab my pant leg. I took a step back in pure disgust. You can't do this. Chloe filed for divorce. She knows about the money. If I lose this job, if I lose the company's legal protection, she'll send me to federal prison. I'll be ruined. Think about my kids, Liam. We're brothers. Blood is thicker than water. I looked down at him. I actively searched my soul for a single shred of pity. I really did. But all I saw was Lily's swollen, bleeding face. Your kids? I asked, my tone deadly flat. You mean the kids whose futures you snorted up your nose and gambled away on blackjack? I am thinking about them, Marcus. That's exactly why I'm taking the company. To ensure there is something left to pay for their therapy. Liam, my mother started to wail that weaponized, victimized crying she had perfected over 40 years. How can you be so vindictive? We are your parents. We gave you life. You can't kick us out of our own company. We have no savings. What will we do? I turned my cold gaze to her. You'll survive, Mom. Just like I did. You have a house, well, the bank owns it now thanks to Marcus, but if you sell it quickly, you might walk away with enough to rent a small apartment. Maybe you can get a job. I hear retail is hiring. A job? She gasped, clutching her chest as if I had physically stabbed her. I am 65 years old. And I was 28 when you threw me onto the street with a traumatized child, I reminded her brutally. I worked 3 jobs on 3 hours of sleep. You can handle one. Arthur hadn't spoken since reading the final total in the ledger. He was slumped in his chair, staring blankly at the cracked table. He looked like a man who had just realized his entire existence was a farce. He slowly raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. I made a mistake, Arthur whispered, a tear finally escaping and rolling down his wrinkled cheek. You made thousands of mistakes, Arthur, I corrected him. No. He shook his head slowly. I bet on the wrong horse. I thought Marcus was the strong one. I thought you were weak, because you cared about art and baking. But I was so blind. You are the one who actually built something. You are the man I desperately wanted him to be. He reached a trembling hand across the table toward me. Son, please, can we fix this? I want to know my granddaughter. I want to see Lily. For a fraction of a millisecond, I felt a tug in my chest. The little boy inside me, who had spent his entire childhood desperately seeking his father's approval, wanted to say yes. But then I remembered the last 5 years. I remembered every birthday he ignored. I remembered the coldness in his eyes, when he chose a grass-stained suit over my bleeding daughter. No. I said firmly. Oh? Arthur physically flinched. Lily is happy, I told him, ensuring every word cut deep. She is kind. She is brilliant. And she is safe. And she will stay that way permanently because you will never, ever be in her life. I signaled to Leo, who had been standing silently in the hallway. He walked in and placed 3 termination contracts and the corporate purchase agreement on the table. Here is the deal, I said, looking at my watch. You sign these. I take the company. I pay off the immediate fraudulent debts so the FBI doesn't arrest you today, but you walk away with absolutely zero. No golden parachute, no severance, no company cars. Nothing. And if we refuse to sign? Marcus asked, wiping snot from his nose. Then I walk out that door, I said, turning my back to them. I call the SEC and the IRS from the elevator, and by dinner time, this building will be raided, and you, Marcus, will be in handcuffs. The pen shook violently in Arthur's hand, but he knew he was utterly defeated. He signed. Martha signed, sobbing hysterically. Marcus signed, staring blankly at the floor, a broken man. I picked up the paperwork, verified the signatures, and handed them to Leo. You have exactly 1 hour, I said to the room. Take your personal photos only. My new security team is waiting in the lobby to escort you out. I turned on my heel and walked toward the door. Liam, Arthur called out, his voice cracking with utter despair. I love you. I paused in the doorway. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I know, I said to the empty hallway. But you loved him more. And that has a price. I walked out of the building and into the pouring rain. But I didn't feel cold. I felt a massive, radiant warmth, spreading through my chest. I pulled out my phone, and dialed Lily. She answered on the first ring. Hey, Dad. Is it done? It's done, baby, I smiled, letting out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 35 years. It's finally over. Are you okay? She asked softly. I'm better than okay, I said, looking up at the Chicago skyline I was now helping to build. I'm completely free. Preheat the oven, kiddo. I'm coming home to bake. Top comments. User 1. The absolute poetry of using an architecture degree to fix a cake, which led to building an empire, which led to buying a construction company. Chef's kiss. You didn't just get revenge, you orchestrated a masterpiece. User 2. The fact that the dad tried to pull the I love you, let me see my granddaughter card only after realizing you were rich and powerful is disgusting. Good on you for protecting Lily and keeping that door firmly shut. User 3. I bet on the wrong horse. That line tells you everything you need to know about your parents. They didn't view you and Marcus as sons to love, but as investments to brag about. Marcus got exactly what he deserved. Aftermath. Final thoughts. It has been exactly 1 year since I walked out of that boardroom into the rain. 1 full year since I surgically cut the cancer out of my life. People often ask me if I regret it. In movies, this is the part where the protagonist stares out a rainy window, swirling whiskey, feeling an aching void where his family used to be. But this is reality. And the truth is, I don't feel a void, I feel profound relief. It's like a low-level, deafening alarm that has been ringing in the background of your life for 30 years suddenly stops, and you finally realize what true peace sounds like. I kept my word. I bought the company, rebranded it, and completely gutted the toxic, corner-cutting culture Marcus had installed. I rehired the foreman Marcus had fired for speaking up. I instituted a generous profit-sharing model for the blue-collar workers. It turns out when you treat people with actual dignity instead of treating them like disposable peasants, business booms. We doubled our profits in the third quarter. But the real victory was personal. I haven't spoken to Arthur, Martha, or Marcus since that day. I maintain the block on their numbers and emails. However, Chloe, Marcus's ex-wife, occasionally gives me updates when we meet for coffee. The fallout for them was swift, brutal, and thoroughly deserved. Without the company credit card and the endless siphon of embezzled funds, Marcus's lavish lifestyle collapsed in a matter of weeks. Chloe told me he tried to keep up appearances for a while, putting rounds of expensive drinks on credit cards that were completely maxed out, but reality inevitably came knocking. His Porsche was repossessed in a grocery store parking lot. Today, the former golden child is living in a tiny, unair-conditioned studio apartment above a mechanic's garage in the bad part of town. He works on commission at a shady used car dealership. Apparently, he tells anyone who will listen that he was the victim of a hostile corporate takeover by a jealous, vindictive younger sibling. He still wears his old Italian suits to work, even though they are fraying at the seams and smell like desperation. He is a king without a kingdom, ruling over a gravel lot of rusted sedans. As for my parents, they had to sell the massive suburban house. After paying off the remaining debts Marcus had secretly saddled them with, there wasn't much left. They moved into a cramped, 2-bedroom condo in a depressing retirement community an hour outside the city. There is no grand backyard for high society parties. There is no status to lord over the neighbors. Just 2 bitter old people sitting in a small room, wondering where it all went wrong. Chloe says they blame Marcus now, speaking about him in hushed, angry tones, but old habits die hard. Martha reportedly still drives an hour every Sunday to bring Marcus casseroles and do his laundry, enabling him even as he drags them straight to the bottom of the ocean. Some cycles are unbreakable unless you are the one brave enough to step out of the wheel. I chose to step out. Last month, I met Chloe at a park downtown. Her divorce was finalized, and she looked 10 years younger. The stress lines around her eyes had completely vanished. He signed the papers. She told me, handing me a coffee. I got full custody. He gets supervised visits twice a month, but honestly, he rarely shows up. He says his business schedule is too demanding. He's selling 2008 Honda Civics. Chloe, I laughed. It's not exactly Wall Street. I know, she smiled genuinely. But thank you, Liam, for everything. The forensic evidence you dropped in my lap saved my boys. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I have something for you. Or rather, for my nephews. Chloe opened it. It was a legal trust fund document. She scanned the pages, her eyes going wide with shock. Liam, this amount. I absolutely cannot accept this. It's not for you, I said gently but firmly. It's an irrevocable educational trust for the boys. Marcus stole their future to pay for his gambling and ego. I'm giving it back. But there is an ironclad clause. Marcus cannot touch a single cent of it. Not for management, not for investments, nothing. The money goes directly to their universities, or to the boys when they turn 25. Chloe started to cry right there in the middle of the crowded park. Why? After everything he did to you and Lily? Because they are children, Chloe, I said, watching kids play on the swing set nearby. They are entirely innocent. I was the scapegoat, and Marcus was the golden child, and look how incredibly messed up we both turned out. I want to break the cycle. I want your boys to know that someone in this family has their back, even if their father is a deadbeat. Doing that felt infinitely better than any revenge I could have exacted on Marcus personally. The best revenge against a narcissist isn't to hurt them. It's to render them completely irrelevant while you succeed and protect the people they neglected. But the absolute highlight of my year wasn't business, and it wasn't charity. It was yesterday. Lily turned 16. In our culture, the sweet 16 is a major rite of passage. But for Lily and me, it carried a much heavier weight. It was the anniversary of the disaster. 6 years ago, her birthday was the worst, most traumatic day of her life. I wanted this one to overwrite that memory forever. We didn't invite any biological family. We invited her chosen family. Her friends from the art club, the staff from the bakery who had watched her grow up, Chloe and her boys, and Leo. I rented out the rooftop garden of the Chicago Art Museum. It was a clear, crisp evening. We strung thousands of fairy lights across the glass pergola so it felt like we were standing inside a glowing galaxy. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner. And then, there was the cake. I spent 2 full weeks engineering it. I didn't want a castle this time. Castles are for fairy tales, and we were living in a beautiful, hard-won reality. The cake was a masterpiece of modern edible architecture. It was 4 tiers, but they weren't stacked. Using a hidden internal cantilever system and magnetic levitation bases I had custom machined, the tiers appeared to be floating in midair, slowly rotating, completely unconnected to each other. It was decorated with hand-painted edible watercolor panels depicting the night sky, transitioning from dusk at the bottom to a star-filled midnight at the top. And in the very center, instead of a fragile sugar house, I placed a single, perfect sugar glass lotus flower. The lotus grows in deep mud but rises above the surface to bloom beautifully. It was a symbol of her resilience. When I wheeled it out, the entire rooftop went silent. The guests gasped, but I was only looking at Lily. She was wearing a stunning silver dress that caught the ambient light, looking more like her late mother than I had ever seen her. She covered her mouth with both hands. Her eyes weren't filled with the sheer terror of frosting and blood like they were 6 years ago. They were overflowing with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "Dad," she whispered, stepping closer. "It's floating." "It is," I said, standing proudly beside her. "Make a wish, sweetheart." She looked at the cake. She looked at me. She looked at the friends surrounding her who loved her for exactly who she was, not for what she could provide them. "I don't need to wish for anything, GMDA. I don't need to wish for anything," she said, her voice strong, clear, and confident. "I already have everything I want." She blew out the 16 silver candles. The crowd erupted into cheers. There was no drunk uncle to ruin the moment. There was no critical grandmother wiping invisible dust off a suit. There was just love. Safe, unconditional love. Later that night, as the party was winding down and the guests were leaving, Lily and I sat on the edge of the rooftop terrace, dangling our feet and looking out over the glittering city skyline. We were eating slices of the floating cake on cheap paper plates. "Hey, Dad," she said, licking blue galaxy frosting off her fork. "Yeah, kiddo? Do you ever think about them?" She didn't have to specify who. I took a long moment to answer, looking at the city below. "Sometimes. I think about how incredibly sad it is. They had everything. They had a family that loved them. They had money, health, and a legacy. And they threw it all into the garbage because they couldn't stop competing with each other to feed their egos." Lily leaned her head heavily on my shoulder. "I'm really glad you got us out. I remember being terrified all the time when we went to Grandma's house. I felt like I had to be absolutely perfect, or they wouldn't like me." "You never have to be perfect for me," I said, kissing the top of her head. "You just have to be you." "You know," she said thoughtfully, swinging her legs, "Uncle Marcus used to say you were weak because you liked baking and art. He said it was women's work and that real men build things." I laughed out loud. "He did say that." "Well," Lily gestured widely to the skyline, pointing toward the district where Vanguard was currently constructing 3 sustainable housing projects, and then to the rooftop we were sitting on. "He sells used cars in a dirt lot. And you built a floating, magnetic cake and literally bought his entire company out from under him. So, I guess he was pretty wrong about what makes a man strong. Strength isn't about how loud you yell, how much you drink, or how hard you can hit," I told her, feeling a thick lump form in my throat. "Strength is about what you can build from the absolute wreckage. Strength is protecting the people you love, no matter the cost." My phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. It was a blocked number, but my phone's voicemail transcription popped up automatically on the screen. It was from Martha. "Liam, it's Mom. It's Lily's birthday today, isn't it? I wanted to say we miss you so much. Your father isn't doing well. His blood pressure is dangerously high. Marcus is asking us for money again, and we have nothing left. We are just so tired. Liam, please call us back. We are family." I read the text transcription in the glow of the fairy lights. I looked at Lily, happy, safe, and entirely at peace resting on my shoulder. I looked at the beautiful world we had built from the ashes of their cruelty. "Who is it?" Lily asked, glancing at the screen. I looked at the message one last time. "Nobody," I said. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't feel a spike of anger. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I just felt a quiet, absolute confirmation that I had made the right choice all those years ago. "Ready to go home?" I asked. "Yeah," Lily smiled, standing up and brushing crumbs off her dress. "Let's go home." We drove back to our penthouse with the windows down, the cool night air filling the car. As I navigated the streets of the city I now helped shape, I started thinking deeply about the psychological concept of the golden child. For years, I deeply envied Marcus. I wanted to be him. I wanted the praise, the easy path, the unconditional, blinding approval of my parents. I thought he was the lucky one. But looking back now, with a decade of clarity, I realized that being the golden child was a horrific curse disguised as a blessing. Because Marcus was never held accountable for a single mistake, he never learned how to grow. Because he was always rescued from the deep end, he never learned how to swim. My parents didn't raise a leader or a businessman. They raised a dependent parasite. They stunted his emotional and professional growth with their toxic enablement just as effectively as if they had physically broken his legs. And being the scapegoat? Being the one who was constantly blamed, ignored, and pushed aside? It was excruciatingly painful. It left deep psychological scars that I will carry for the rest of my life, but those scars eventually became my armor. The sheer neglect forced me to be entirely independent. The constant, unfair criticism forced me to be a perfectionist in my craft. The total lack of financial support forced me to build my own unshakable foundation. I am the man I am today specifically because of what they did to me, not in spite of it. They tried to bury me in the dirt, but they didn't realize I was a seed. I know there are thousands of people reading this right now who feel exactly like I did. Maybe you are the black sheep of your family. Maybe you have a sibling who can do absolutely no wrong, while you are criticized just for breathing too loudly. Maybe you are holding on to a deeply toxic relationship because society has hammered it into your head that blood is thicker than water. Let me tell you something that took me 35 years of pain to truly understand. The full, original quote is actually, "The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb." It means the bonds you consciously choose to make with friends, with partners, with the people who actually show up for you in your darkest hours are infinitely stronger than the random bonds of biology. DNA is just a genetic lottery ticket. It doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you. It doesn't give anyone a lifetime VIP pass to disrespect your boundaries, steal your peace, or physically hurt your children. I used to think that cutting my parents off would kill me. I thought I would die of guilt and loneliness. But the exact opposite happened. The moment I cut the dead weight, I finally came alive. I look at my life now. I have Lily, who is growing into a compassionate, brilliant, and fiercely independent young woman. I have a thriving business that I built with my own 2 hands, based on integrity, hard work, and mutual respect. I have friends who would drop absolutely everything to help me if I called them at 3 a.m. I don't have a perfect, fake family photo to put on the mantle to impress the neighbors, but I have absolute peace when I put my head on the pillow at night. If you are waiting for an apology that never comes, stop waiting. If you are trying to buy love and acceptance with your silence and compliance, stop paying the toll. If you are letting toxic family members hurt you because you are terrified of being alone, let me tell you from the other side. Being alone is 1,000 times better than being surrounded by people who make you feel incredibly lonely. Marcus is still out there somewhere, standing in a dusty car lot, probably blaming me for his total misfortune. My parents are still out there, sitting in a cramped condo, waiting for me to magically come back and fix the massive mess they created. But I'm not coming back. I have cakes to bake. I have buildings to design. And I have a daughter to love. My name is Liam. I was the discarded scapegoat who became the architect of his own destiny. And if I can rebuild my entire life from the shattered, bloody rubble of a 10-year-old's birthday cake, then believe me, you can rebuild yours, too. Thank you for reading my story. It wasn't easy to drag these memories back up, but I hope it helps even one person out there realize that you hold the power. You always have the power to walk away. Thanks for watching. Thank you for reading. The Bit On. Stand your ground, protect your peace, and build a beautiful life they can never touch.